Thanks, Yuriska. I got a haircut this week. I don't know if you noticed. Thanks for noticing. Great. Happy Father's Day to me. Although then I went to Stanhope and I saw they were offering a free beard trim for Father's Day, and there's nothing worse than finding out you didn't get the best deal around. I went to the barber this week, and the guy that cut my hair had the most colourful language I've ever experienced from a barber. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've heard colourful language before. It was just in the shopping centre, surrounded by people. It was just a strange context, this very colourful language from this guy. And it started, like right from the beginning, it was quite jarring. I started to tell him kind of what I wanted, and I said, well, what I've been getting in the past, and he just cut me off and he said, I don't give a flower. Right, the word wasn't flower. I think you understand. I don't give a flower what the previous guy did. Just tell me what you want. I'll make it perfect. That's how it started. But it just kind of went on and on. The song came on that he really loved. He got into it. Then he looked around, and he goes, "Oh, look at these flowering carnations. They don't know how to party." And then he said, like on the weekend, bunch of old flowers they are. No idea. This went on for a little while, till the question came, it's the question, anyway, what do you do for a living? Now, I don't use the word priest very often. If there was ever a time to kind of whip it out, this would have been the moment, I think. I didn't. But I said, I'm a minister of a church. There was a pause. And then he came down next to me, made eye contact in the mirror and said, sorry, what did you say? And I said, I'm a minister of a church. Another very long pause. And then he said, I am so sorry. And then he turned around and he did these ones. And then he came back and he said, I'm a good boy. I swear. Needless to say, the rest of the haircut was reasonably silent. I tried to make small talk, but it makes me think. There's a point. I'll get to it. It does make me think a little bit about kind of that idea what people think of God's judgment on the things we do. That moment that he had to kind of signal a sorry to God makes me think, what does that look like for people and their different thoughts on that? We were discussing at our life group this week the idea, some people say the phrase, if I ever walked into a church, God would probably strike me dead or the roof would fall in. I don't know if you've heard that phrase. I don't really understand the phrase. I've heard it many times, but I don't really understand it. Because I feel like I just don't understand what the thinking is. Like, what do you think's going on there? You're out living your life and God just can't find you. He's angry at you. He wants to strike you with lightning, but he can't find you. But when you come to his house, there you are. I've been looking for you. Bang, you're dead. Like, is that what's going on there? Or the idea that all the horrible things I've done in my life, but the one of walking into a church, that's the last straw for God. He's going to say, I don't care about the other stuff, but you showed up here, bang, you're dead. Like, it just seems, I guess I don't really understand that thinking. But also there's just kind of this idea people have about God, that he's kind of this, maybe one of the pictures is a vengeful God. He's angry, he's out to get us. Or the other one is like the prayer negotiation strategy, where it's like, God, if you do this for me, I promise I will give up on my floral language. It'll never again, or I'll be good if you do this. There's this negotiation, and God's kind of like this genie, but it's not 3 wishes. It's like very limited wishes, but you've got to kind of pick and choose, those ideas. Or he's just a moody being. He has a good day, great. The sun's out, shining. Bad day, tidal waves, storms, earthquakes. Is that the picture we get of God? None of that is the picture the Bible gives us of God, and yet our experience is some of these things of good times and bad times. And also, we know that there are parts of God. He is the just judge. Now, he's the just judge, And that means that justice requires consequences. Someone can't be a good judge and not also have appropriate consequences. This passage we read, it's a classic kind of Father's Day passage because it talks about fatherhood, although to be fair, it's not a very fun Father's Day topic. The topic is discipline. Happy Father's Day. We're going to talk about discipline. I heard one preacher say that a woman asked him, "What are you preaching on this weekend?" And he said, "I'm preaching on discipline." And she said, "Oh, I don't like that topic." And the preacher said, "Me either." Like, it's not a fun topic to talk about. It's quite tricky and difficult, and we don't like discipline ourselves personally. And the truth is, this passage isn't so much talking about how to discipline or that we should discipline. It's not a guide to parents in any way. That's not what really is going on here. I listened to this old Scottish preacher, Alistair Begg. He's 70 now, but he's talking about this passage and talking about discipline. Tells this story. He was in the shops, and there was a kid over there in the shopping trolley, but he called it the chariot, which is super cute. The kids over in the chariot with their mum and crying out, "I want the big book, I want the big book, I want the big book." And Alistair Begg goes, "I just wanted to walk over there, take the big book," and boom, not on the child, but on the mother. Like, there's this idea of encouraging kind of right discipline, but that's not entirely what's going on in this passage. It's using an illustration. It's actually using an illustration of broken humanity and poor discipline, and saying that there is a type of right discipline. God is the perfect Father, is the picture we get. But it's a tough topic, and it's even worse than just kind of saying it's talking about discipline. It's not talking about disciplining children. In this passage, we are the children. We are the ones receiving discipline. More specifically, the message is to those who are the children of God. The message here is not just to anyone. He's not talking about God's discipline on the wrathful that are out there, or God's discipline on those that have floral language, or God's discipline on those who know how to party on the weekend. This is discipline for his children, which makes it even harder to kind of work our way through it. Makes it even more difficult topic. And what's weird is it uses this really positive language. You notice this is verse 5. Have you forgotten the encouraging words God spoke? What are those encouraging words, you might ask? The words are, "The Lord disciplines those he loves." I don't know how you feel about that. It's not particularly encouraging. It reminds me when I started college, many of you know, just a couple of years ago, I had to study full-time for a couple of years in order to become the senior minister here. And so I was really wrestling with how am I going to do that, study 5 days a week in Newtown, but also try to work to still pastor a church here. And I went to the interview and I was told that you're a unique case. The principals realise you're in a unique situation. He wants to interview you personally with the principal. And I was quite hopeful that in my unique case, there was going to be a great conversation about how can we make this work. Oh, my naivety in that. He's a principal. He's got a particular job. And so the way the conversation went is, don't think you're going to come here and slack off and tick a few boxes so that you can get your credentials and not study hard. Now, I don't know if I have oppositional defiance disorder. I did in that moment. It's a wrestle. Discipline or correction is not fun, and yet it was still an encouragement, not in the good feeling way, but his encouragement was, don't waste your time at college. It's going to be difficult. You've got a few years to do this, but make the most of the learning opportunity that's coming. And that is the reality. When we face the topic of discipline, it's not fun. It's not pleasant. The passage points out that no one enjoys it when it's happening. It hurts. But there is such a thing as good discipline, right? And that's the picture we have here. In particular, the motivation of pure discipline is love. That's the picture we have. that God is doing this as an act of love. It's interesting to pair the idea of discipline and fathers. It probably raises a whole lot of baggage for us all as far as our experiences, our family culture, what the role of the father was in a family, whether he did that role well or not. Often we think, if we want to draw an example, especially on Father's Day, of a good father, we're going to think of the great things he did, the good, loving, generous times he had. I think of the passage when Jesus talks about God as the Father, and he talks about God giving things. This is in Luke 11, talking about prayer. He uses the example. He says, "Fathers, if you ask your child for a fish, do you give them a snake instead? Or if they ask for an egg, do you give a scorpion? Of course not." Right? His example is, you know how to give good gifts to your children. So if God is the loving Father, he also knows how to give good gifts to his children. Often that's the picture we have of what a good father looks like. And of course, this isn't just talking about fathers. This is an example of parenthood in general, that good parents, good guardians, good caregivers know how to give good gifts. They know when to say yes, but they also know when to say no, right? If your son asks for a fish, do you give him a snake? Well, no, you don't give them something to eat that's not for them. To be fair, like I asked my kids for a fish for Father's Day. I have a fish tank, I'm setting it up, and we've mail ordered some fish. That's a fun process. It's courier, by the way, not like lick, stamp, post. Comes with courier. If my kids asked for a fish, I'd happily give them one. If my kids asked for a snake, they would get a fish. Like that's what would happen in my household. We know when to say yes, but we also need to know when to say no. And snakes are not my thing. That is what good guardianship looks like. That's what good caregiving looks like. And so we get this picture of what a good parent might look like. They know when to say yes, they know when to say no. I think of my own father and the role of discipline in my house. You try to remember your childhood memories, and you ask your parents about them, they go, that never happened. My memory is that there was a phrase in my house used sometimes, just wait till your father gets home. I don't know if you ever experienced that in your house. I don't know if that's true. I remember, and I don't know what happens when he gets home. I feel like I never waited to find out. My parents would say I was very trying. It's not like I wasn't a bad kid. I just don't remember. I do remember a lot of respect for my father. And to be fair, I think I'm very fortunate. I have a great relationship with my parents. They did discipline me in the traditional sense, if you know what that means. And I don't think I have any baggage or damage or anything from that. I very much respect my parents and for all the mistakes they made. I'm not saying my father's better than your father, because that goes without saying. But I understand there seemed to be a role in my house where Dad had a discipline role, but it's different in each house. Is that the right thing? And we come with lots of baggage. We understand the imperfectness of fatherhood, of parenting, the mistakes. And so as we try to apply this passage, we need to be really careful that we don't bring the inappropriate baggage to apply to what it means for God to be the Father. This message is God is the perfect Father. He's not having an emotional outburst because he's been worn to his limits and has a bad moment and just has an emotional outburst. This is an eternal, all-powerful God that doesn't have that. He's always just, always right. And so we can't associate those kind of negative ideas of what it looks like for discipline for God. This is a loving discipline. And I want to say this. I think as we think about discipline, I think it's too narrow to just think about kind of punishment for wrongdoing. we use the word discipline in many different ways, but you grow in discipline, right? You can discipline by creating guidelines to help someone mature, to build better habits. We talk about being disciplined in certain things. And I think it's right to say that is certainly part of the meaning here. The passage never talks about repenting and never talks about turning away from the wrong thing you did. The message here is much more about a long-term growing process. There's a building of character, there's a growing. But what's clear is it's not pleasant. We were told it's painful. Whatever kind of discipline we're talking about from God means there's difficulty involved. And the motivation is perfect love. And the purpose is our good. That's why he uses the word encouraging. Verse 5, this encouraging word, he also says, don't give up. Verse 10, God's discipline is always good for us. The message is God is growing us. And growing takes time. In fact, he uses the illustration of a harvest. It says, no discipline is enjoyable while it's happening. It's painful. But afterwards, there will be a peaceful harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way. A harvest takes time. I remember this story I heard. I don't know if it's a true story, but a story of a grandfather and his grandson building a veggie patch, a bonding moment for them. They're planting potatoes in the veggie patch. A little while later, the family is looking for the grandson, can't find him anywhere, finds him asleep on the dirt at the veggie patch. And when they wake him up and they say, what are you doing out here? He said, I was waiting for the potatoes to grow. Very cute story, great moment, grandfather and grandson. But we understand he's not going to see the potatoes grow. He will see the growth, but he won't see them grow. That's the reality of what happens often in our hardest times. Growth takes time. And so the passage is encouraging us. The reality is that we do face difficult times. And we want to be careful that we don't kind of categorize any difficult time we have distinctively, simplistically. So not every difficult time you have is necessarily going to be talking about the discipline that this passage is talking about. There's lots of reasons why we face difficulty in our world. But I think if you're a follower of Jesus, the message is that all difficulty we face will give us opportunities to grow. And so not all difficulty might be God disciplining us, but all difficulty we face is an opportunity to grow. And growth takes time, but God is working for our good. That is a hard thing to process at times, isn't it? When we can't see the good that's happening. This Scottish preacher I listened to, Alistair Begg, says, he says it like this. He says, how it hurts in the present is secondary to what it holds in the future. What comes out of difficult times is of greater value than the hurt that we face. And so we are encouraged to endure, but we're encouraged to not just endure. We are encouraged to embrace God's discipline. Growing takes time, but growing also takes work. It's hard work. My brother-in-law owns Anytime Fitness, owns a few Anytime Fitness gyms, and you know, the myth of kind of getting fit fast, right? It's a thing. I don't know. The old I don't see them anymore. Maybe they're not around. Maybe I just don't watch broadcast television anymore. But the old kind of fitness exercise advertisements, like the ab roller and stuff like that, and it's always like this guy with rock hard steel abs. And it's like 5 minutes a day, and you could be like this. And You can't. It's not going to happen in 5 minutes a day. And conveniently, it slides under your bed as if that's the place you want your fitness equipment. Like, you want to roll out of bed, the first thing you see, oh yeah, that's right, I'm not doing that today. Like, that's not what you want. So it takes time, it takes hard work, and anyone who has gone through the fitness and is into fitness knows that. I say to my brother-in-law, I'm just waiting for the tablet. When the tablet comes out and that gives me rock hard abs, I'm buying into that. He said, me too, because it's going to kill my industry and I'm going to have to diversify my investments at that point. There is some weight loss things, that chemicals, tablets you can take, but not there's no miracle rock hard abs. It takes work. And what we're encouraged here is not just endure, but embrace discipline to grow, right? It's possible to discipline and not have growth. It's possible to discipline and not be a learning experience. I worked for a group home a number of years ago with teenage kids that were in foster care, and we did lots of training on kind of handling behaviour. One of them was this process we went through for debriefing kids after an incident. So it's hard to get kind of a process of conversation when emotions are heightened. So when emotions have come down, we're going to have a debrief. And what happened in that debrief? You know, the classic questions: what happened? What should have happened? What could you have done better? What will you do better in the future? It became clear after a while, the kids started to learn the right answers to that process. And in their head, they're going, how do I stop this debrief as quickly as possible? I got to give the answers that you want to hear. How did it happen? What happened? What should you have done? I should have been more kind. What will you do in the future? Oh, be kind. Like, that's kind of, it can be discipline without a learning process. If we are to embrace hardship in a way that makes us grow, we need to seek growth. We need to not just endure, but embrace and grow. That's the message that comes from a loving God who only disciplines justly in perfect love, does it for our good, and invites us to grow. And so to finish this morning, I want to read again those last verses that we read, which is a reminder of that process of embracing the hardship we face. Here it is, Romans 12, verse 12. So take a new grip with your tired hands and strengthen your weak knees. Mark out a straight path for your feet so that those who are weak and lame will not fall but become strong. That's our encouragement as we face difficulty, to not just endure, but embrace and grow. Let me pray. Lord God, we thank you that you are the loving Father, and often we get that skewed. We fall into the trap of thinking of you as vengeful, thinking of you as out to get us, thinking of you as someone who just doesn't care. We thank you that we know that a loving parent does correct, guide, and grow their children. And you do that perfectly. We pray, Lord, that we might not just endure, but embrace the growth that you give us. Amen.